Mary Cowett, we love you. To build peace, bake the bread of peace. You, poem, again, wake me from sleep. You want me to build a poem of peace for those who won't be heard. So many voices for peace fall on deaf ears, deaf ones with selective non-hearing, who know that war is terrible, but terribly profitable. Poem, you tell me to help build a nation of peace by baking the sweet bread of peace. You say begin to knead the dough of listening with hands of kindness. Blend water of empathy as you gently knead the tribe of connection. You know this on account of how you swam through the sea of experience. You learn to start with the multicolored flower of love and light, mixed with the yeast of diplomacy, so we can rise to the challenge of change. Add the salt of the earth, the innate wisdom of Mother Earth that guides us to care for one another. The rainbow flowers of our hearts wish no harm to any man, woman, or child. In that way, we are all of us from the same tribe, the tribe that loves children. Jimmy Collins was my black African brother from different mothers, an Army veteran who lived in peace, who believed that the world was one big family. Poem, you remind me that the ancient land has two peoples who are both descendants of Abraham, who continue to recreate Munich of 1930 instead of Munich of 2023. Jimmy Collins loved the calla lily. It was his flower of peace. On October 7th, 2023, he would have never sent thousands of rockets to the Holy Land. He would have sent thousands of calla lilies to honor both the sons and daughters of Abraham. Poem, you woke me to ask us all to be from the tribe that loves children. Love is not abuse. Poem, you remind us that a parliamentary government can choose leaders who love the calla lily, leaders who follow the recipes of peace, who bake the bread of peace for the people. When you feed your people with the sacred bread of peace, you always remember that love is not abuse. Welcome to Intifada. We have a cast of a chorus of poets that I'm going to introduce in just a minute or so. But let's do a little bit of housekeeping. We want to give some love to Alfred Williams, who is recording this. And the poets all know that we're being recorded so that our audience that's small tonight is going to be expanded because this will be on YouTube. And what this is all about is honoring Steve Cowett and honoring his legacy. And it's also about putting a cease to genocide, putting a cease to the violence that's going on. And one of the things that's important for me to tell you is I got a phone call. Brandon, would you raise your hand, please? This young man called me. And Shadab, would you raise your hand, please? And he said, Shadab wants us to do this event. And we need to honor the legacy of Steve Cowett. And then she sent me an email and she said this: the only thing I'd like to say as emphatically as possible is that we're raising our voices against the current genocide of Gazans, some that has been enabled by the machinery of the 75-year-long illegal occupation of Palestine. Steve Cowett spells it out. We gather to show support for the survivors who are burying their dead between bombings, the 5,000 plus children who have been slaughtered in the last weeks. Total death toll, nearly 10,000 human beings dying in conditions so horrific And I can't imagine trapped under rubble, unplugged from life support, in power outages in cancer hospitals. This is about humanity and our role as enablers in the worst genocide of this century. I ask that we include Jason Perez. Jason, raise your hand, please. Most of us are not equipped to discuss the political solution, but each one of us is conscience bound to speak against the cold-blooded massacre of a whole population and erasing their names from civic records as if they never existed. That is a wonderful heart that wrote that. Please welcome Shadab Z. Stashmi.
Good evening, everyone here and our virtual attendees. Each one of you is bringing a sensitive, beautiful heart. Some of you are bringing beautiful voices of poets. Thank you so much, Jim and Brandon and Jason, for standing with humanity, for bringing your voices as poets and people of conscience. I want to show my gratitude to Mary Cowitt, Steve Cowitt's wife, who's here joining us virtually. We're very grateful for your presence and for all the support you've given us for our event here. We hope to read this poem again and again in many different places for other people. We know this poem well, we knew Steve well, but this poem needs to be out, be heard widely. Very deep thanks to everyone who's here to share the poem together. Angelica, Nasha, Daniela, Jason, Brandon, Joe, Jim. So thank you all. So I'm going to share a few words. I think Jim shared most of what I'm going to say, but here are some of my words. To feel the burn when someone else is lashed. To choke on smoke in someone else's lung. To be in agony when someone else's child is trapped under rubble. To speak out in support for another people, the perceived enemy. From the painful place of the trauma of one's own, even at the expense of being ostracized, and to write poetry of witness as authentically and fearlessly as Steve Cowitt did is, in my opinion, the greatest contribution to human civilization from any poet, anywhere, at any time in history. It sounds like a sweeping statement, but I mean every word of it. It is a testament to how a poet can dismantle the colossus of the colonial narrative and make language itself larger, capacious enough to hold and carry all our living hearts. The only place to find moral clarity. And today, with heavy hearts, we, poets of conscience, friends, colleagues, and students of Steve's, remember him and join our voices with Steve's fiercely compassionate, lucid voice for justice and peace. We have gathered to mourn every single life lost in the most recent of the decades-long series of killings in what we call the Holy Land. We stand for all victims, regardless of ethnicity and religion, in grief over the death of each innocent civilian, each aid worker, journalist, and doctor. We stand with the families who are burying their dead between bombings, the nearly 5,000 Gazan children who have been slaughtered among the total death toll of over 14,000 within the past 5 weeks. These are men, women, and children dying in or surviving conditions so horrific it defies the imagination. Trapped under rubble for hours, cut off from life support due to power shutdowns and blasts, even in medical facilities such as a pediatric cancer hospital. Worsening the trauma of the bloodbath that has ensued in bombings in hospitals, churches, mosques, schools, and refugee camps is the blockade of water, food, and medical supplies. We stand with those in Gaza who have been violently evicted from their family homes, whose orchards have been burned down, whose multi-generational names have been erased from civic records, and those who continue to be tortured and humiliated in the streets by IDF soldiers. We stand with those who continue to risk their own lives every moment as they try to rescue or give live coverage. We have seen many cameras shudder and go dark. At least 36 reporters have been killed. Most heartbreakingly, we stand with those for whom there is a newly coined acronym in the language of emergency relief. WCNSF. Wounded child, no surviving family. What is their future? What is our future after having copiously funded and supported a genocide? I believe each one of us is conscience-bound to speak against the cold-blooded massacre of a whole population and the heinously systematic erasure of their existence. Again, as we stand in solidarity with Palestine, we honor Steve Coward as history's rare truth teller, a poet who honored the legacy of the Jewish people in the noblest way by extracting it from the oppressive doublespeak of Zionism, subverting its narrative of victimhood and letting the actual humanity of his people shine through. Steve wielded words with power, delicacy, knowledge, and heart. The painstaking documenting of Palestinian victims, naming the atrocities committed against the other, is unheard of in contemporary Western literature. Intifada is a work that will endure for its spectacularly genuine, beautiful, genuine gesture for humanity. And we are proud to call it our legacy as Steve's students, colleagues, and friends. May there be peace. Thank you.
Brandon Simon, stand please. Brandon participates in the arts of the San Diego-Tijuana region with an informed personal perspective of the historical influences at work there. For over 28 years, Brandon was a lecturer at California State University, San Marcos, teaching literature and writing courses. He is a poet teacher for 22 years in the California Poets in the Schools. Thank you for coming. Joseph Milosh, stand please. Joe Milosh has 4 books. San Diego City Library selected his latest book, A Walk with Breast Cancer, for a local Poet Book Award. His book, Home Plate Was the Heart and Other Stories, was nominated for the American Book Award and the Eric Hoffer Best Small Press Publication Award. Shadab Aziz Tajmi, stand please. Shadab Aziz Tajmi, a poet and essayist, is the winner of the San Diego Book Award, the Nazim Hikmet Poetry Prize, and multiple Pushcart nominations. Her books include 2 poetry collections, a volume of craft essays, and poetry titled Ghazal Cosmopolitan, and the latest one, Comb, a lyric memoir which was awarded the Best Hybrid Book of 2019 by Sable Press. Aziz Tajmi's poetry has been translated into Spanish, Turkish, Bosnian, and Urdu, and has appeared in numerous anthologies and journals worldwide. Nasha Khan, stand please. Nasha Khan is a literary fiction writer with an MA in writing from USC. She also studied screenwriting and prose at the University of Cambridge. Her work appears in the 64 Best Poets of 2019 by Black Mountain Press, Blue Minaret, The Tempest, and ESPNW of all things. Jason Magabu Perez, stand please. Jason Magabu Perez serves as San Diego Poet Laureate. He's the second San Diego Poet Laureate and is the author of This Is For the Mostless and I Ask About What Falls Away, forthcoming in 2024. Perez's work has also appeared in Witness, The Feminist Wire, Interim, and NPR's Here and Now, among others. Perez is an associate professor of ethnic studies at CSU San Marcos. Daniela Paraguaya Sol, please stand, is a Filipino-American poet who serves as an associate professor of English at Grossmont College. She is a graduate of the MFA in Creative Writing program at San Diego State University. Her writing has since appeared in Mixed Asian Media, the Lumiere Review, the Hyacinth Review, Welter Journal, and elsewhere. Her first full-length poetry collection, Half Moon Rising, will be published by Kelsey Books in late spring of 2024. Angelica M. Yanez, stand please. Yanez, I said that wrong, I apologize. Is the advisor to a writing group that promotes activism through spoken word at Palomar College. She is the program advisor for the new Chicana Studies degree in Ethnic Studies Department. She's a full-time professor of Ethnic and Chicano Studies. Angelica is a traditional Aztec dancer and mother that honors the legacies of her indigenous ancestors. Can we give some love for this poetry choir, please? You two on Zoom, too. So, are you ready for intifada? That's all the noise you can make on Zoom?
You're on mute. You're on mute.
Intifada begins with an epigraph from the Jewish paradox. They only see one thing. We've come here and stolen their country. Why should they accept that? They may perhaps forget in 1 or 2 generations' time, but for the moment, there is no chance. The words that David Ben Gurion. Because Nebuchadnezzar, the Chaldean king, and his Babylonian armies destroyed the first temple, and the court of Judah suffered expulsion. And because the sword of Renepta, the sting of the lash of Assyrian armies, and legions of pious crusaders condemning the Torah to flames, and we were led off by halters, enslaved in Armenia, Georgia, the Caucasus, because we suffered Chrysostom's rage, enslaved Chrysostom's rage, Luther's Hitlerian frenzy, the Dominican Fathers' inquisitorial cross.
Because we were numbered among the transgressors, scattered among nations, expelled from the Rhineland, Bavaria, Spain, brought as a lamb to the slaughter at Prague, named Mirov, Tarnopol, Bar, Salonika, because we were dragged through the streets of Chattel and set to the torch in the shul, were crucified, blinded, boiled in oil, and buried alive. Because we were stuffed into cattle cars and our neighbors said nothing.
Were gassed in the showers, died screaming for mercy, and no one protested. Am I now to rejoice that my Palestinian brothers and sisters, dispossessed of all that was theirs by the Ben Gurion's bloodthirsty armies of conquest and plunder, are even today being chained at the wrist, blindfolded, mocked, spat upon, kicked to the ground, pummeled and bloodied, and left there to rot in the heat of Negev.
because the Einsatzgruppen mowed down the Jews in the streets. Do I turn my back now and forget that the farmers of Khan Yunis were murdered in cold blood? That the shepherds of Kafr Qasim were shot where they stood? That the massacred women and children of their Yasin were flung into wells? That the village where Mahmoud Darwish was born no longer exists? That 750,000 indigenous Palestinian Arab people were ethnically cleansed, forced to flee for their lives to the squalor of refugee camps.
While the sanctimonious Zionist settlers stole all that they owned, that the infants and aged and sickly who could not survive that tormented journey are buried out there where they fell. Am I to forget that unspeakable terror, that despair? Am I to forget that the Palestinian homeland was stolen? My mishpucha, look elsewhere, turn away with 1,000 excuses. Benny Morris and Ari Shavit shake their heads gravely. Don't you see? Had we not done those unspeakable things, our wonderful Jewish state could not come to exist. Amused from their graves, Joseph Goebbels and Philip Buhler wink at each other and grin.
Because of the curfews, expropriations, expulsions, the knock at the door, because of the Anschluss, the Kristallnacht riots, because of the boot of despair and the cheek of denial, because we have suffered the smokestacks of Auschwitz, the mass graves of Chelmno and Belsen, because we fell at the walls of the ghetto.
Am I to pretend now that the people of Ramla, Al-Lid, Balad al-Sheikh, Qisas and Haifa, those shepherds and farmers and teachers and merchants and mothers and workers have not the right to return to the land that was stolen, the land that is incontestably theirs, the land that their fathers had tilled for 1,000 years?
Because I am Ashkenazi, a Jew, a son of the tradesmen of Krakow, Lithuanian fiddlers, Talmudic scholars, the wandering peddlers of myths. Child of the Khazar diaspora, exile, as are we all in this world? Am I not of the Amalekite people as well, part Moabite, Chaldean, Toltec, and Pawnee, son of a long line of Canaanite cobblers, Nigerian plowmen.
Child of those who escaped from Milas, Soweto, Sharpsville, Zimbabwe, Belfast, Jakarta. I am Kurdish, Armenian, of the wandering Romani people, of Calcutta's untouchable Harijan masses, part Lacandon, Keech, and Yana, of Tasmanian blood, born of the Sac-Fox Nation, son of the Bayou, a runaway field slave, sojourner, nomad, pariah, Untermensch, heir to this world of nettles and dust.
That is to say, I am of the Shebab of pure Palestinian blood, a Fadaean, son of Jerusalem, shepherds, child of Al-Nakba, son of those with the bayonet at their throats, the ones beaten, raped, and expelled by Bangarians, terrorist settler militias. Should I forget the Lebanese dead, the blood of Shatiya and Sabra? Am I to forget that Ashbeard, Yusuf, and Mohammed Sabab were beaten to death? That Shohel Santu's son is still missing? That Fadi Salim has lost his right leg? And that Sohail El Ali was thrown from a bus? that Tamar Dasuki was shot in the back,
that Mustafa Hamdan was buried alive, that the husbands and sons disappear into prisons, and the women weep by the rubble of stone and cement that had once been their homes in the Gaza to which they had fled, and yet managed somehow still to go on. What choice do they have? Balagush, Emunim, and the minions of Valman, Shmuel, Derlich, Zivi, Begin, Shamir, Kihan, Sharon, and Bibi the Yahoo parade through the streets, cursing the filthy Arabushim. Am I to forget the apartheid wall that steals yet more of the land and makes life more unlivable yet?
The Bedouin villagers razed to the ground, the sociopathic shelling, the slaughter of women and children huddled in schoolrooms and shelters, and Bikipla Sabras danced through the Tel Aviv streets chanting gleefully, "No school tomorrow in Gaza, all of the children are dead."
While the villagers pray and the young men throw stones, I stand in the shadows and watch. I say nothing. Shots have been fired. A handful of men are hauled off for beatings and administrative detention. Their confessions are written in Hebrew. A mother runs through the darkness. "Mustafa," she whispers. "Mustafa? Mustafa?" I hear the sharp breath intaken, the all but inaudible weeping, the desperate vows of revenge. I know well the names of the dead, whose homes the occupation forces demolish.
The names of the children the settlers have kicked to the ground. I know who is missing, whom the soldiers have beaten, whose land this time has been taken. In the back seat of the taxi, Samia Mahmood is trying to breathe, a girl of 14 who will die if her father and she are not permitted to cross. But the IDF soldier who stands at the checkpoint, a boy of 19, looks at the papers her father's trembling fingers unfold and shakes his head. No, they will not be permitted to cross.
Should I pretend I heard nothing, saw nothing, that none of this was my business? Am I to forget that Israel Zenger declared that the Arabs must be removed, and that Yosef Weitz and Chaim Weizmann did also? And Ben Gurion swore he saw nothing wrong with compulsory transfer. And Golda Meir had vowed that now that they're gone, we will not let them back.
About the skull of the rope of bondage, pricking my throat, I rap the kafia. Let the young men take up their stones. Let the people arise. Let the lamps of the priest of the Lord of plunder sputter and darken. Let the armies of occupation tremble. What was dread has been sharpened to metal and festered to gall. I will no longer listen in silence. Do I too, like my Zionist countrymen, keep my mouth shut? Do I simply say nothing? Just turn my back? Do I too become a good German?
Because the Oramus et pro Perfidus Judaeus, that terrible Good Friday prayer, because of the tear gas attacks and the nighttime raids and the endless arrests, because redeeming the land is circumlocution for theft, that never-ending settlement project. I stand with this heavy stone in my hand, unbending, silent.
because of the Easter pogrom and the Nuremberg laws and the Aryan clauses, because of those who have stood here before me to say this cannot be done in my name, I can no longer be silent. Because of Gus Shalom and Yesh the bull, and breaking the silence, and woman in black, and because the terrible fate of the white robe, I stand my ground at the edge
of an olive grove in the village of Dir Isja. I can do nothing no longer.
Steve mentioned the Palestinian poet Mahmoud Darwish, whose city was razed, the village where he was born and raised was knocked down in 1948. He died in exile. This is a poem of his titled Psalm 2. Now I find myself dried like trees growing out of books. The wind is just a passing thing. Shall I fight or shall I not fight? That is not the question. The important thing is to have a strong throat. Shall I work or shall I not work? That is not the question. The important thing is to rest 8 days a week. Palestine time. Country turning up in songs and massacres. Show me the source of death. Is it the dagger or the lie? Countrymen turning up in songs and massacres. Why do I smuggle you from airport to airport like opium, invisible ink, a radio transmitter? I want to draw your shape, you scattered in files and surprises. I want to draw your shape, you flying on shrapnel and birds' wings. I want to draw your shape when heaven snatches my hand. I want to draw your shape, you trapped between the dagger and the wind. I want to draw your shape to find my shape in yours and get blamed for being abstract, for forging documents and photos. You trapped between the dagger and the wind. Country turning up in songs and massacres. How could you be a dream? Rob me of the thrill and leave me like a stone. Perhaps you are more sweet than a dream. Perhaps you're sweeter. There isn't a name in Arab history I haven't borrowed to help me slip through your secret windows. All the code names are kept in air-conditioned recruiting offices. Will you accept my name? My only code name, Mahmoud Darwish. The police in Camel's Pines have whipped my real name off my skin. Country, turning up in songs and massacres. Show me the source of death. Is it the dagger or the lie?
Thank you, Brandon. I think we have the sound fixed on Angela Davis now. Again, the title of the essay or the title of the speech is Palestine is a Moral Litmus Test for the World. Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Mark.
In the midst of Israel's relentless attacks on Gaza, numerous black activists in the U.S. have expressed their solidarity with Palestinians, and they've called once again for an end to the occupation. Back in 2020 in Gaza City, in the midst of Black Lives Matter protests, a Palestinian artist painted a large mural of George Floyd, the African-American man, of course, who had recently been murdered by a police officer in Minneapolis. These two places are more than 6,000 miles away from each other, yet Palestinians and Black Americans have found a common cause with each other's struggles. How does a moment like that, how do these moments come to be?
Well, Mark, for as
about as long as my political memory goes back. I think the causes of Palestine and Black liberation have been intertwined. And I just can't imagine that those of us who call ourselves scholar activists, I can't imagine not calling for justice for Palestine. I can't imagine the whole agenda of social justice in the world not including Palestine. In this respect, I think Black people in the U.S. and throughout the region of the West of this hemisphere should feel a very special tie to Palestinians. Of course, there is a long history, but I think back to June Jordan, the incredible poet, when very few people were talking about the importance of supporting Palestine. June was up front, arguing that it was not only necessary to support people in Palestine, but to recognize that Palestine itself is a kind of moral litmus test for the world.
Yeah.
Of course, Nelson Mandela said that South Africa would not be free until Palestine was free. So Palestine occupies a very central place in the political imagination of the last 50, 75 years.
A lot of people, when they hear the word solidarity, they think sameness. But the conditions between Black folk and Palestinians, the conditions are different in certain ways. How much of the solidarity movement hinges on us having the exact same oppressive conditions, and how much of it is about the broader systems of power that put us where we are? How do we, and because I think a lot of people say, well, my life isn't like a Palestinian, and the Palestinian says, well, I don't have to deal with those things over there. How do you tease that out?
Those who assume that they live in a very small, insulated space in the world are just not recognizing conditions as they are today. We do not live in silos. We do not have our little bubbles in which we get to choose what affects us as individuals. I think that what is really exciting about this last period, as much suffering as we have witnessed and experienced, is that we've seen movements against racism expand. We would not have imagined so many people identifying with these anti-racist efforts. And now, of course, we're saying, we're seeing those who are reacting against it. Those who don't want to see us move forward in our understanding of the way in which racism in the U.S. is very much connected to apartheid in South Africa, which is very much connected to apartheid in Israel. Right. So yeah, this is a question that can't be answered abstractly. I think it's a question that has to play out in the course of the practice of solidarity.
One of the things that's come up in that practice of solidarity is conversations about the role of policing as well. For years, there have been exchange programs that bring together police, ICE, border control, FBI, all from the United States, along with soldiers, police, and border agents from Israel to share tactics on quote-unquote counterterrorism. Both the U.S. and Israel have been accused of repressive policing, of racial profiling, and they continue to sort of deepen their ties toward developing a kind of shared security model. When you see those relationships, what can we learn from that?
Well, those relationships that link the militarization of the police in the U.S. and other countries to the leadership of of Israel, the IDF, and which is trained police forces all over the country, it becomes clear, I think, that all these issues are intertwined. Let's remember that Cop City is developing in Atlanta, and precisely at a time when the police were on the defensive as a consequence of the struggles that were catalyzed by the lynching of George Floyd. The police were on a defensive for a little while, but now it appears as if they're trying to not only regain the position they had before, but move forward. And not only
I mean, I was just thinking, it's not just governments either, right? I mean, private entities are also involved in these kinds of exchanges. For example, we've seen the export of security and technology from private Israeli companies that supply some of Israel's military equipment, surveillance equipment for things like the separation wall between Israel and the West Bank. The same companies are working with the U.S. to provide technology for things like bolstering surveillance and militarization along the U.S.-Mexico border. When we see private corporations benefiting from oppression, even through the discourse and language of security, that complicates the analysis a little bit, doesn't it?
This is a camera lucida, and for the whole of the 19th century, it was the indispensable drawing aid for great.
Well, I think that should probably be at the center of the analysis. Because we often don't explicitly talk about capitalism and the reasons, why the political ties between the U.S. and Israel, for example, are so strong. What does that have to do with the development of global capitalism over the last decades? And, what does the prison industrial complex have to do with shoring up a capitalist system? That's oftentimes the elephant in the room. That's oftentimes that about which we do not speak, but it is central. It is absolutely central.
You have a very grand, radical freedom dream for dismantling capitalism, for abolishing policing in prisons, and for ending the occupation of Palestine. I mean, these are not short-term goals. These are not easy solutions that we're looking for here. And in all of those areas, we see progress and then we see retrenchment. We see 2 steps forward and then we see steps back, sometimes 1, sometimes 3. Given where we are right now on the question of Israel and Palestine, do you remain hopeful?
I don't think that I get to decide on that basis. Of course, there are moments when we feel extremely distressed, and this is, one of the tragic moments in our recent history. But I also should say that it takes time. It takes time. And oftentimes we are unable to see where we're headed. But we have to believe that it is possible to make change. And we can't give up. We can't give up. We can't not hope, because hope is the condition of all struggles.
We'll leave it there. Angela Davis, thank you so much for joining me on Up Front.
Thank you so much, Mark, again.
Alfred and I did not get a commission because you saw Spacebar commercials for all of that. That's a condition we called in the Navy snafu, and sometimes there's things beyond our control. Before we go on with the poetry, does anybody have any questions or comments about that film? Even though you couldn't see her, there were some important points that were raised. We have a table over here, and we have someone who has given us a donation. We're asking for a donation. This is what we just read to you. This is Intifada. Mary Cowett donated this, and if you're on Zoom, what we're going to do is we're going to make it available to you for a donation. And then Joe, Would you just say what you told me about one of the places that we could send the money that we made from this?
Oh, yeah, the United Nations has a fund that is going to Gaza and the Palestinians. The UN has a fund that they're setting up that is going towards the Palestinians to bring in food, medicine, water. And that might be a good place to give some of the donations. There are others, so that's all I got to say.
So we're not quite sure how we're going to make it available to you on Zoom or to the public, but we want to follow Mary Cowlett's wishes in a good way. We always do things in a good way that we can. And so please stay tuned because we think it's very important. What's your name? Lou. Lou? So Lou, can we give Lou a hand? She gave us our first donation tonight. I'd like you to welcome a woman who is very strong in our community. She's strong in California. She's strong in the United States, and she's strong internationally. This is Shadab Aziz Hashmi.
Sure. So it's still recording, and people on Zoom can see it. You guys just can't see it up here. And the Zoom session crashed, but we're still recording here and I'm recording.
So everybody hear that? We're still recording, even though you can't see it up there.
So I don't know
I'd
why.
like to thank Alfred for all the support,
Yeah, you're welcome.
and thank you. Thank you. And thank you again. So much gratitude to each of you for being with us tonight. So I'm going to share a poem of mine that's very new. I think it's still writing itself. I wrote it a few days ago, and I think it's going to keep writing itself.
Days ago? 2 hours ago.
Okay, I have a witness here.
Let's do.
The eye of history never sleeps. It sweeps you in, atom, so you happen again and again to return as a body part bearing witness. In the slaughter fields that were golden grows in another time. Your ear of its own accord bears witness to the blast, the whetted shrapnel, the cries of mothers that lacerate the heavens. Your eyes bear witness to the ocean of white shrouds that was 30 days ago a city, 100 years ago a jewel of the Eastern Mediterranean. Your feet lead you nightly in your dank, cavernous dream, where you are so small, you know your mother by scent alone, and father by the muscular crook of his arm. Here you are, washed up on the shore of primal remembrance, an infant among infants, sweet and blind and held together by love alone, until a house, a hospital, an apartment building collapses on you, until your neck is squeezed between metal rod and concrete, and body parts of the universe that were once your mother and father. Except for the susurrus of your countrymen sharpening knives to sacrifice one people over another people, there is dead silence. The eye of history is a camera that does not shudder and go dark after a bombing. You remain in the middle of its crosshairs. The eye of history dangles over your morning coffee, waiting for your tongue to finally bear witness. Thank you. Thank you.
The next member of the Intifada Poetry Choir, we learned tonight. I really like how she read to you. This is Nasha Khan.
So I wrote this poem in 2014, in the summer of 2014, during Ramadan, which is a very reflective time for Muslims, spent abstaining from food, water, specific habits and behavior, and focusing inward on self-improvement. The 2014 massacre saw 71 Israelis, mostly soldiers, and 2,200 Palestinian civilians killed. Over 17,000 homes and thousands of other buildings, including hospitals, schools, and factories destroyed. And a complete dismantling of Gaza's economy, leaving 80% of its population living below the poverty line and relying on humanitarian aid alone. I wrote this poem after seeing a photograph of a young boy bike riding under clear blue sky between the bombed rubble of what was once a neighborhood during the temporary ceasefire. It's called The Ride. We coast along the road, tires grazing, skidding, against Tuesday's bath. The stain remains of my neighbor's child, through tattered bits of dirty red, the doll her father gave on this bloody Eid, all that is left. Alongside me, my new friend, El Amin, the truthful. Orphaned in a fortnight too, the younger one of us, he speaks with wisdom I wish not to see. His mother's severed head, you see, rests upon the very bed on which he used to sleep. Rubble everywhere we go, so we take another road. Clean up time before the wired silence breaks the brutish breath of dusky air in the intimacy of dead's toll. At every turn, it is the same. No peace, except the still faces of the slain. This July, the wind feels warmer than before, but what is above spurns what is below. The clear sky, its blue bright, says nothing of the crimson sheet that bonds the living to the near dead. Another day gone, another night come. Signs for those who think, save one, whose wings stretch through bloated clouds, and the angel's horn again explodes.
Please welcome Joe Malash.
You know, this is really quite a painful time. And I was listening to the news today, and they were talking in Israel, there's this big scandal going on. Netanyahu sent his son, part of his inner circle, to Florida. And while he was in Florida, he was hanging out with David Duke, the KKK, and the poor boys on the beach having barbecues. And it made me think about racism and its ties in the Middle East and America. And I'm not as eloquent as Angela Davis, but you know, right now they are creating euphemisms that are going to be used to spread hatred. We know what Ronald Reagan did when he mentioned welfare mothers. We're having the same thing today in America when they're mentioning Zionists, and they just sanctioned Congressman Tlaib, and they're calling her a Muslim. And although that's true, they're not using it to express distinction. It's becoming a euphemism for terrorism to be used against all minorities. So I think as poets we have to be aware of that. Anyway, I'm going to talk a little bit about, I'm going to read this piece about war. But before I do that, I'd like to dedicate this poem to my wife, Patsy. Patsy, te amore sempre. Patsy, I will love you forever. I believe war is merely murder, sanctified by God and the state, which is why every soldier throughout history has learned the old lie: it is sweet and fitting to die for one's country. In basic training, they taught me that it's good to die for God and country, but it's better to kill the enemy than to die. Killing is murder, and having God or state sanction it does not change the immorality of the act. Because soldiers carry out the orders to kill, and in war they see their friends die, they suffer a permanent affliction from it. A World War II veteran, my Uncle Bob, died at 95. He bore bayonet scars running the length of his thighs, and during his last months he suffered nightmares of hand-to-hand fighting and would wake crying, "I didn't mean to kill him. I had to. Killing is evil, and soldiers return from war with a psychological disorders. We call it PTSD, battle fatigue, but it's shell shock. And the condition destroys the life within the family and themselves. Although it's not always true. When governments declare war, they forget about the well-being of people who suffer and die.
Well, you can just make it inside like a foam ball and then
Continue.
I care not, because I have friends on the Israeli side and the Palestinian side of this war. They know people who were killed, injured, raped, or brutalized. And how can I choose one side or the other? How am I to feel? I care about the marginalized people of Israel and Palestine. And although one side blames the other for war, atrocities exist on both sides. I refuse to argue which one has the moral or historical justification to continue to murder people. According to the Dalai Lama, Martin Luther King, Christ, Ruma Hekmat, and the great Crow medicine man, Chief Yellowknife, the only cure for state-sanctioned murder is compassion and respect. There are plenty examples of malicious intent directed on American states by the United States. Example of our treatment of Native Americans, African Americans, Mexican Americans, Chinese Americans, Japanese Americans, and the list goes on. Today, the news reports attack on our Jewish and Muslim brothers and sisters in the U.S. In the United States, every racial and ethnic group has contributed to our country. They fought and died for us. Their actions demonstrate their love for their adopted country. I hope we do not become deaf and blind, enclosed in the armor of our obstinacity and our willful ignorance. I wish that we refuse to slip into anti-Semitic or anti-Palestinian language as we offer our support to the oppressed citizens of Israel and Palestine. Thank you.
When we have a professor of ethnic studies chosen as the second poet laureate of San Diego, we know that this place is moving in the right direction. So please welcome the second poet laureate of San Diego, Jason Magabo Perez.
Thank you. Thank you for being here and for organizing, for the tech and the folks joining us through Zoom. So I'm just going to read an excerpt from a poem also by Mahmoud Darwish. Yeah, it's just been sort of deep, coming back to some of his work that I studied in grad school, and just sort of coming back to it has been clarifying, I guess is the best word I can say. So this is a translation by Mohammed Shaheen, and the poem is titled Counterpoint for Edward Said. Right? And so it's sort of like a story and a story, sort of, there's kind of, not like dialogue, but like it tells a story and sort of has some imagined dialogue and, that he's had with Edward Said, and their sort of long friendship and sort of thinking about Palestinian liberation. So this is when the reference of like when there's going to be a moment where the speaker says he says, I believe Darwish is talking about Said. So this is counterpoint. The reader will wonder what poetry says to us in a time of disaster. Blood and blood and blood in your land. In my name and in your name. In the almond blossoms, in the light and shade, in the children's milk, in the grain of wheat, in the tin of salt. Skillful hunters hit targets with distinction. Blood and blood and blood. This land is too small for the blood of its children who stand on the threshold of the resurrection in masses. Is this land really blessed or baptized in blood and blood and blood, which neither prayer nor sand dries? There is not enough justice in the pages of the holy book to rejoice martyrs as they walk free above the clouds. Blood by day, blood in the dark, blood in words. He says, the poem may host loss as a thread of light flashing in the heart of a guitar or a messiah on a horse, pierced by beautiful figurative language. This aesthetic is only the incarnation of truth in form. In a world that has no heaven, the earth becomes an abyss, and the poem is one of its consolation prizes, one of the qualities of the winds, north or south. Do not describe what the camera sees of your wounds. Shout so that you hear yourself. Shout so that you know that you are still alive and you know that life is possible on this earth. Invent a hope for words, or an area, or a mirage to prolong hope, and sing, for beauty is freedom.
Alfred, can we take this off and have the people on Zoom put up there? Is that possible?
It's not working.
It's not working?
It's, yeah, there's something wrong with the connection, because we still have the Zoom connection here, it's just not displaying up here.
Okay.
And so we'd have to take everything down and put it back up, and we're seeing it, they're seeing it on Zoom, and I'm recording it here. They're just not seeing it up, we're just not seeing them on Zoom.
Okay. All
They're
right.
seeing us.
No problem. Thank you. As we have 2 poets left. Everybody doing okay? Did you get your money's worth? Our next poet was a student of Steve's. She's very proud of that. That was one of the first things she says when I met her tonight. This is Daniela Paragaya Sao. Please come up and read your poem. I probably butchered your name, didn't I?
You said it correctly earlier. Daniela Paraguaya So. Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me in this space. I want to thank Shadab, especially my former SDSU professor. I loved your class, and it's an honor to be here, especially like Jim was saying. I took Steve Cowett's class, so yeah, he was an amazing man, very funny, always made us laugh in class, super engaging, entertaining, gave us great feedback on poems, always showed us great examples of good poetry. I think the book in the palm of my hand was like my, Bible, quote unquote. It was just something I always went back to because I was hungry for poetry as a student. So I wrote a poem yesterday. This is really hot off the press, and I hope you receive it. Thank you. We forget the simple things, how much they mean. Morning tea, sipping from an unbombed balcony. We forget the power of power, phone signals, internet available to call someone. We forget how to truly connect, how to wrap someone we love with a hug, not a body bag or bed sheet. Because everything that once was is now obsolete. Voila, voila, there is nothing but this unrest. We forget to put a speaker to the voices of the oppressed, the terrorized, the trapped, the left behind, the sirens wail, drowning out their cries. We forget to uplift voices like the voice of Musab Abu Toha. Trapped in Gaza, he writes, I see wounded women and children bleeding from their faces and chests. A big fire is burning. I find a pharmacy, check my body for injuries, and try to help those around me. We survive again. And we forget the courage of journalists, of photographers like Samara Abu Aloof, who will do anything to bring a smile to a child's face, like Malak, who brings big as she wears the press vest and helmet. I'm the goal. And this is why I don't understand. I don't understand why we forget what self-defense means. It does not mean killing children, bombing hospitals, burying in the dust, building after building. What are we even building anymore? Because now we can never forget. The frightening whir of the drones hovering over debris, the dead, the dread, the disappeared, taken hostage, all this unfathomable fear. There is no bandage. For all the damage that cannot be undamaged, we mourn. For all the scarcity of water and the bellies that beg for bread, we cry. For the makeshift hospitals scattered on the streets, tempting the innocent, our fists furl and unfurl in frustration, condemnation. I can't help but think of Noor Hindi's poem, the one entitled, Fuck Your Lecture on Craft, My People Are Dying. Oh, Sige, it's true. Who can boast about consonants and alliteration and glorify the flowers and the moon when the body counts are this high, high enough to reach the damn moon? The bleeding is not in buckets, but in craters. Nerves of pain stretch to all sectors of the world. We are here, shocked and shaking, and yet somehow we must remember the power of ourselves, the power of one. How important more than ever when the smoky skies shift to give us clarity into kindness. Mabuhay tayo, mahal kita. If I give you my hand, will you take it? Will you walk me
to your homeland, the one before the shattering. Thank you.
Well, we're down to our last poet. Thank you all for hanging out. I really appreciate it. And we have another professor of ethnic and Chicano studies with us tonight. And I think it's very cool that she's also an Aztec dancer and mother. That I know she's teaching her children about the legacies of her ancestors and about what they went through. This is Angelica M. Yanez.
Good evening, everybody. Just wanted to say hello. If I haven't had a chance to introduce myself, my name is Angelica Yanez. Thank you to all the poets, everybody in attendance, everybody on Zoom land. So like some of my fellow poets, I just wrote this today, a couple hours ago, to be in solidarity. It's still writing itself. So this is for everybody here tonight. The way of war on native land. 1. Usurp the land. Greedy gold digger. Terraform. Poison. Air, water, soil. Call it civilized. Attempt to slaughter its people. Think it's sane. Colonizer. You forgot that stolen land will always remember the brown hands that feed it. The people, the color of dirt and mud, can create anything from the earth. 2. Draw lines in the sand. Call them legal. Code for brown people, stay out. Unauthorized. Alien. Colonizer. You forget. We have walked this earth with our cracked feet upon our mother for a millennium. Border walls do not recognize us. 3. Declare us strangers in our own land. Assimilate. Desecrate. Historical trauma. Whitewashing. Colonizer. You forget we are not foreign. We are here because we've always been here. 4. Attempt to make our movement impossible. Criminalize our bodies. Deny our ritualistic migrations. Divide the land. Colonizer. You forget that we are a people that move to a sacred rhythm, to the thunder in our bellies. Our kids will know bean, corn, and the history of homeland. 5. Target our children. Terrorize, kidnap, force them into cages, separate our families. Colonizer, you forget we will hold you accountable for the tears you compelled from our children. Each battle a cry echoing through history. Be it the detention centers along the US-Mexican border, the legacy of Indian and colonial schools, the sorrow of the stolen generations, the injustice of Japanese internment, the haunting memory of slavery, the plight of children in Palestine, or the insidious school-to-prison pipeline. 6. In the 16th century, you debated if my people had souls. Stories of savage, serpent, sinister, spirit-sucking. Colonizer, you forget you describe yourself. Ravenous, racist, tumors in your head and your heart.
stale air to choke your humanity. I want to take this moment to give a land acknowledgement of the indigenous people of this land that we now call America, the Americas, Mesoamerica, Turtle Island, the Western Hemisphere. We have always been here. I currently reside in North County, San Diego, where the Kumeyaay people are, different parts of San Diego, the Luceño. I am a daughter of diaspora, an indigenous woman from the south of that border I do not recognize. I want to give thanks to my people that have survived and have believed that I can stand here in front of you with my mixed mouth, with my poor English, with my sorry Spanish, and my sorry Nahuatl. I am here because my ancestors survived. And sometimes I wonder of the integrity of the land acknowledgements, because they often forget to include the land. I want to take this moment as an indigenous woman to give thanks to the land that we walk on, the altar that I call home. I want to give thanks to the water, all the waterways, the minerals, the plant nation, the animals, the rocks, and all the beautiful people that stand upon it. Oh, Mateo, thank you.
Bia Kakichwan, Ahash Ish Cho, Hotwi Maipe, Hotwi Alakoi Maipe, Hotwi Konkanut Mawa, Ikontik Dotskonen Sutich Wowak, Ibna Out no na Kachipi. I said, you are my sister. I wish you good spirits. Don't forget to listen to the sound of the wind blowing the leaves in the trees and on the ground. And if you're drowning in any problems, I ask the dolphin to come to you and help you keep your head above water. Can we give her some more love, please? I've had a lot of phone calls the last few weeks. People upset, people discouraged. And I've had to do a lot of encouragement, a lot of nurturing. And the thing about it is, about 50 years after World War II, people started asking, what did the people of Germany do? Why did they let so much carnage happen? What were they doing? And I don't think they're going to ask that about us, because we have these writers that you just heard, and we have young people that I go to the young people's hip hop and rap poetry readings, and they're writing about this, and Helika and Jason can probably vouch for their students, and so. When you think about what people might be asking about what did we do in 2023, you know, you can write your congressman, you can write your senator, and you can say, war fuels climate change. It's a fact. You don't have to come from the taking sides for ethnicity. You can take sides for Mother Earth, like my sister was just saying. You can do a lot of different things with that pen and that keyboard. I'm a little bit too old to march in the streets now. Every time I hit about a half of a block, I lose my breath. I got a few problems from Agent Orange in Vietnam, and I'm 75 years old. But you don't have to march. You know, when we're older, you've got a mortgage, you've got some children you've got to take care of, and you've got that kind of stuff. But you can write. And you can be a voice for the voiceless. That's what Pablo Neruda said was our job. And if you have that pen in your hand, remember, your job is to comfort the disturbed. But your job is also to disturb the comfortable. You are my America. You can't get away from it. No matter what you try to do, you are my America. Zoom people, you are my America. I love you all, and there's nothing you can do about it. I'll see you next time. Thanks for coming.